Okay, everybody, welcome to CSM Talk, the podcast where we talk about customer success. We've been away for a couple of years. A lot has changed, I think you've noticed, in the world in those past couple of years, and a lot has changed in customer success and the format of this podcast, in fact. So we're back. So 10-minute podcasts, customer success and AI, what's not to love. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest. Please, Manuel, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi Kevin. Hi everybody. My name is Manuel Hanrisch. I'm currently a fractional chief customer officer at TopSource Fractional, and I help and serve early stage startups anywhere from late stage Series seed through Series A get their customer success function stood up right the first time around. Prior to that, I've been in the customer success space for roughly 10 years. And prior to that, I've spent quite a bit of time in other early stage startups with support, post-sales, pre-sales, engineering, the gamut, if you will. So I've been around the software industry for quite a while, and I've seen the evolution. And it's continuing now, obviously, that we have AI as a capability. So excited to be here today.
Fantastic. So, Manuel, could you just talk us through one of the problems you want to discuss today and how AI has kind of helped with that?
Yeah, I think the most glaring problem that I've seen over the last few years, and this goes all the way back to sort of the first CS organization that I stood up, was sort of an information problem. I'd often get leadership periodically say like, "Hey, where are we at with this particular account?" And then sometimes they'd ask a few more times, "Where are we this account and this account?" Or maybe there's some potential risk coming up. And before you knew it, you had this task list of 10, 15, 20 accounts that you had to bug your CSMs on in order to get a full picture and a full view on. And oftentimes that would even evolve into like an entire book of business review for either a subset of your CSMs or for the entire set of CSMs. And that's a very intense process, right? If you have a typical enterprise CSM, they have a book of business, upwards of 50 accounts sometimes, several $1 million of ARR. And being able to know everything that's going on across those accounts requires, a lot of research, digging through Slack threads, looking at prior notes, maybe talking to their CSE, their customer success engineer, talking to sales engineering, various parts of the company in order to put together that picture, right? And then once they've done all of this work, and on 50 accounts or so, that can easily take 6+ weeks. It certainly has, in past companies. It's immediately outdated as soon as you put this together and you do that big presentation for the product team and the marketing team and the exec team, whoever else wants to be part of that. So high caloric burn when it comes to actually performing this work, and obviously takes away from other tasks, with a moderate return on the investment. And so that is really a big challenge, and one that can be overcome more easily with AI going forward.
This resonates with me as a former CSM, and this is a proper coverage model problem, right? Because if I, as I have done with, like, say, my enterprise CSM, going, okay, I'm going to give you 4 million and 25 accounts. You can bet at any particular point in time, there's about 3, max 5 they are really working on that they can do this on.
Yes, that's exactly right. And even if they do more, it just consumes a lot more cycles, and then it also decreases the accuracy, right? Like humans can only account for so many different threads, even if they write them down. Things inevitably get lost and signals kind of dull in the process. Yep.
Can you talk me through sort of the approach you've taken with AI that has addressed this?
AI has made this tremendously easier. First, and I've seen a lot of people start there, you take all of your account notes, whether you took them manually or maybe you had a local transcriber running. You take any other notes that either kept in Google Docs or whatever, any emails that you may have had with customers, any Slack threads and things like that. You copy and paste all of that, and you effectively create a context window for each of your customers in something like a Claude or an OpenAI ChatGPT or one of the other large language models. And you effectively continue to put that information in there. You feed it all that, and then you ask it questions, right? And if you do that, you can put together like a general overview of how we're performing in a particular customer. Now, this is highly manual, right? It requires you as a person to constantly feed new threads in there. It also means that you as the one feeding it in are ultimately responsible for what's going into there, and you may not capture all of the context. So one example of that might be sales rep might have a one-off conversation with a customer, maybe it gets recorded, but you're not in it as the CSM. Well, you're probably not going to get that transcript, right? Or even like the summary of that call, unless you're super lucky and the rep just happens to remember and share that with you. But it's still better than having to manually research everything. Step two is to kind of look at the the various different vendors that are already out there. Folks like Zoom obviously has AI assistants for call recording. Gong does. You can even get some of this directly out of Gmail now, if that's what you're using as your email system. With Gemini, you can ask it specifically to one customer what the interactions were. And then the various ticketing systems have a way to account for this as well. This is obviously a graduated step from the first one, which is just manually grab everything and throw it in the LLM. The challenge with this is it lacks context across different vendors, right? Because your Gong recorder isn't going to know what's in your Gmail. Maybe it does. There's some integrations there, but it's certainly not going to know what's in your Slack or in your ticketing system. So that is the next step. And then ultimately, the final boss, the end game here, is cross-channel intelligence, and that's really where execution intelligence then comes to bear. There are platforms out there now that can effectively integrate with all of your other vendor systems. So your Gmail via API, your Gong, your Zoom. If you're using HubSpot, if you're using Salesforce, it can connect to those systems. Slack, Teams, all the places that you are having interactions with your customers, it can connect to. There are even now ways to do it for in-person meetings. There are companies that are making little wearables. Obviously, it's a consent challenge, and you have to make sure that there is consent for that to be recorded. But even those meetings, say at a trade show over a dinner or something like that, those can also now be captured and ingested into these systems, and then having a holistic view. There are some vendors in this space. One I've seen pretty successfully do this is called Back Engine, but there are certainly others that are emerging that are really putting together that account intelligence, execution intelligence platform. And that's really the most mature way to use AI for these tasks today.
There are three kind of stages of sophistication that you can go through. So you can start. If I was a CSM, what you could do is for the first piece, or like the entry level, is looking at collecting all your kind of data that you have from activities or whatever you've got, pipeline reporting, whatever information you can get your hands on, and put them into something like a Notebook LM or a Copilot or something, and on an account basis, start prompting it to say, tell me where my risks are, tell me what I should put as mitigation plans. So that's a quite hands-on and quite quick way you can get going on that. If I look at the last piece, the most sophisticated piece, where it's aggregating all these different sources and being able to actually intelligently predict things and actually put plans together. What are your tips for being able to sort of get back together and build business cases and maybe get started with this?
Yeah, great question. Here's what I'd say, just to frame this. It's become a lot easier with the advent of APIs for everything. This used to be much more difficult to pull off when that wasn't ubiquitous. But generally, you need to build a coalition across the company and at the executive level to make sure that people are aware that this is something that can be done, and it will increase accuracy and basically appeal to the what's in it for them mentality. And as long as you do that, the actual connection of a system like that can be done in a matter of hours if you have all the right players in cooperation. So your Gmail admin, your Slack admin, Salesforce admin, folks like that. It's just simple token exchanges to set this up. But you do need to get the buy-in. You need to have people understand what the value of it is and what they're getting out of it, which is full transparency, right? It's awesome once you have it in place, but you have to make sure that people understand what the value is for them.
Fantastic. So, Manuel, thank you very much for talking us through this and how this has actually made an impact on the organizations you've scaled up. How has this kind of worked? What was the before and after you got from this?
Yeah, so the before was basically, it took 6+ weeks to do account reviews. Lots of people were involved. Lots of one-off meetings had to happen. It became stale by the time it was done. In fact, it oftentimes was even stale before it was presented because maybe one account was put together 2 weeks ago and new signals have come in since then. A lot of times risk signals were sort of buried in the details. And if a human had to review all of this, they may miss it, right? And again, it was a high caloric spend. Lots of CSM time would go into that, and obviously they would not have that time to spend on other high value things like talking to customers and understanding business cases and things like that. So afterward, right, once we had put a system like that in place, all of those challenges kind of went away. Like, intelligence was available on demand. You could chat with a particular customer and ask questions about opportunities and risks, and even things like what are outstanding deliverables. You could also do this holistically across the entire customer base or a segment of the customer base. It would also flag risks proactively, which was tremendous, right? One offhand conversation that happened might have yielded a huge red flag, or might have yielded a huge upsell opportunity, right? And so now it would proactively let people know that this was happening. So it really shifted the mindset away from having to assemble these data points to just being empowered to have great conversations and trusting that the system would capture all the necessary signals.
Fantastic. So if people want to understand how you can help them or get in touch, how would they do that?
Yeah, I am certainly open to new clients. If anybody's out there that's getting curious about how to use AI to drive CS team efficiencies, you can find me here. Topserve.info is my domain. My LinkedIn is on here. Obviously, you have my contact information here as well. By all means, please reach out, and I'll be happy to take a look at what you have and develop a plan together.
So, thank you so much, Manuel, for talking us through this. This is super useful, super helpful, and I love the sort of progression stages and the plan that you can sort of put together on this. So thank you very much for being on CSM Talk.
Yeah, Kevin, it was great. Thanks for having me, and thank you, everybody else.